Some mistakes cost a few dollars, others cost a reputation. But for Donovan Kinsley, a shark in the world of venture capital who thought the world was his chessboard, one mistake cost him everything. He thought Lila was just a clumsy waitress at an upscale Manhattan steakhouse, a nobody he could humiliate to impress his business partners. He handed her a legal contract worth $400 million and laughed, daring her to understand a single sentence. He didn't know that the woman pouring his wine held a secret that could burn his empire to the ground. This is the story of how arrogance finally met its match. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Obsidian, Chicago's most exclusive rooftop dining establishment. At 70 stories up, the city looked like a circuit board of gold and amber. But inside the private dining room, the atmosphere was colder than the storm outside. Donovan Kinsley sat at the head of the mahogany table, swirling a glass of Pinot Noir that cost more than most people's cars. He was a man who took up space, even when he wasn't moving. At 45, Donovan had made his fortune aggressively acquiring tech startups, stripping them for parts, and leaving the founders with nothing. He was wearing a bespoke suit from Savile Row, but his eyes carried the predatory gleam of a street fighter. Opposite him sat Winston Pratt, a nervous man representing the board of Aerodyne Systems. Winston was sweating, despite the climate-controlled air. Between them lay a document that was 3 inches thick, the merger agreement. "You're stalling, Winston," Donovan said, his voice a low rumble. "The offer expires at midnight. You sign over the controlling interest, or I trigger the debt clauses and you lose the company by Monday morning. It's not a negotiation. It's an execution." Hovering in the background was Lila. She was 26, with tired eyes and hair pulled back into a severe bun required by the restaurant's strict dress code. Her uniform was crisp, her apron spotless, but her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the silverware on the side station. She had been working a double shift, her third of the week, trying to scrape together rent for a shoebox apartment in the South Side. To Donovan, Lila was furniture. She was less than furniture. She was a utility, like the thermostat or the light switch. He didn't know her name, and he didn't care to. "It's the liability subsection," Winston stammered, tapping the document. "My legal team says the language regarding the pension fund is ambiguous. If we sign this, and the market turns, the employees lose their retirement. I can't do that to them, Donovan." Donovan laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound that made the other diners turn their heads. "Morality is a luxury for the poor, Winston. You're playing with the big boys now. Who cares about a few hundred mechanics losing their 401ks? We're talking about a $500 million liquidity event." Lila approached the table to refill the water glasses. She moved silently, trained to be invisible. As she poured water into Winston's glass, she caught a glimpse of the paperwork spread out on the table. Her eyes lingered on a paragraph, bolded in red ink. Donovan noticed the pause. He snapped his fingers in her face, the sound cracking like a whip. "Hey," he barked. "Eyes on the picture, sweetheart. You're paid to pour, not to read." Lila flinched, a splash of water landing on the pristine white tablecloth, just inches from Donovan's cuff. The room went silent. Donovan stared at the water spot as if it were a pool of toxic waste. He slowly looked up at Lila, his expression shifting from annoyance to cruel amusement. He saw an opportunity, not just to punish a clumsy server, but to assert his dominance in front of Winston. It was a power play. If he could break this girl, he could break Winston. "I am so sorry, sir," Lila whispered, reaching for a napkin to dab the spot. "I'll change the cloth immediately." Donovan caught her wrist. His grip was firm, trapping her hand. "Leave it. You've already done enough damage to the aesthetics." He released her, wiping his hand on his own napkin, as if her skin were dirty. "Tell me, what were you looking at? You seemed fascinating by the contract. Were you trying to steal corporate secrets?" "No, sir. I glanced at the text," Lila said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. Donovan leaned back, a smirk twisting his lips. He picked up the heavy legal document and dropped it onto the edge of the table with a heavy thud. "A waitress who reads," Donovan sneered, looking at Winston for validation. "That's rich. Tell you what, since you're so interested in high-level corporate law, why don't you entertain us? I'm bored, and Winston here is losing his nerve." He opened the contract to page 42, the dense wall of text regarding force majeure and fiduciary duty. "Read this clause," Donovan challenged, pointing a manicured finger at the page. "If you can explain what it means, in plain English, I'll tip you $5,000 right now. Cash." Winston looked uncomfortable. "Donovan, let's just sign—" "Quiet, Winston. I want to see this," Donovan interrupted. He looked at Lila. "Go on. $5,000. That's probably 6 months of wages for someone like you. All you have to do is explain the contract." He expected her to cry. He expected her to run to the manager. He expected her to apologize and retreat, proving to Winston that the weak deserve to be crushed. He didn't expect Lila to step forward. The restaurant manager, a sycophantic man named Gavin, had noticed the commotion and was rushing over, looking ready to fire Lila on the spot to appease the VIP client. But Lila held up a hand, stopping him. She looked at the document. Then she looked at Donovan. $5,000? Lila asked. Her voice had changed. The subservient tone of a service worker was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. $5,000, Donovan confirmed, pulling a money clip from his jacket and slamming a stack of hundreds onto the table. "But if you get it wrong, or if you waste my time, you walk out of this restaurant right now, fired. No reference, no final paycheck." "Sir, please," Gavin, the manager, interjected, sweating. "Lila, step away." "No," Lila said. She picked up the heavy document. She didn't hold it like a menu. She held it like a weapon. She adjusted her glasses, her eyes scanning the text with a terrifying speed. Donovan smirked, taking a sip of his wine. "Look at her, Winston. She's pretending to read. It's adorable." Lila ignored him. Her eyes darted across the lines. Party of the first part. Limited liability. Shell Corporation indemnification. The text was deliberately convoluted. It was designed by high-priced lawyers to confuse people, to hide malicious intent under layers of Latin and jargon. It was the kind of contract used to steal livelihoods. Lila's finger traced the paragraph Donovan had pointed to. It was a standard indemnity clause. But then she turned the page. "You said I needed to explain the contract," Lila said, not looking up. "Does that apply to just this paragraph, or the context of the deal?" Donovan chuckled. "Surprise me. If you can understand any of it, I'll pay up." Lila looked up. Her eyes were hard. "This isn't a merger agreement, Mr. Kinsley." Donovan paused, his glass halfway to his mouth. "Excuse me?" "You're presenting this as a merger between Kinsley Ventures and Aerodyne Systems," Lila said, her voice projecting clearly across the silent room. "But under the definition of assumed liabilities in subsection C, coupled with the intellectual property transfer clause on page 12, this isn't a merger. It's a hostile asset strip masked as a partnership." Winston sat up straighter. "What did she say?" Donovan's smile faltered. "She's speaking gibberish. She heard the word asset on a movie once." Lila didn't back down. She flipped back to page 12. Clause 14b states that all patents currently held by Aerodyne will be transferred to a holding company based in the Cayman Islands immediately upon signature. That holding company is listed here as Vanguard Holdings, LLC. She looked directly at Donovan. However, Lila continued, if you look at the cross-reference in the footnote, Vanguard Holdings is fully owned by Kinsley Personal Trust, not the parent company. You aren't buying his company for your investors, sir. You're stealing the patents for yourself, personally. Once you have the patents, the contract allows you to declare Aerodyne bankrupt within 90 days, because the company will no longer own its own revenue-generating assets. The silence in the room was deafening. Even the rain outside seemed to stop. Winston grabbed the contract from Lila's hands, frantically flipping pages. Is that true? Is the IP transfer immediate? It's standard boilerplate, Donovan yelled, his face turning a shade of red that matched his wine. He stood up, towering over Lila. You little liar. You don't know what you're reading. I do, Lila said calmly, because you used the Sullivan precedent for the bankruptcy trigger. It's a rare clause, usually only used in maritime law to sink distressed vessels for insurance. Applying it to a tech company is aggressive, and frankly, illegal under the SEC regulations regarding good faith dealing. Donovan froze. The Sullivan precedent. That wasn't common knowledge. That wasn't something you Googled. That was deep, obscure contract law taught in only a handful of Ivy League advanced seminars. Who are you? Donovan whispered, the arrogance draining out of him, replaced by a sudden, icy paranoia. Lila placed her hand on the table. I'm the woman who is going to take that $5,000 now. Winston was reading furiously, his face pale. My God, he muttered. She's right. The patent transfer. It's immediate. Donovan, you were going to gut us. You were going to leave the pension fund with nothing but a shell company. Winston slammed the contract shut. The deal is off, and I'm calling the regulatory board. This is fraud, Donovan. Attempted fraud. Donovan ignored Winston. He was staring at Lila. He looked at her uniform, her apron, her worn-out shoes. It didn't make sense. You're a waitress, Donovan spat. You serve steaks. How do you know about the Sullivan precedent? Lila picked up the stack of cash from the table. She counted it slowly, deliberately. Then she looked Donovan in the eye. 3 years ago, Lila began, her voice low. There was a small biotech firm in Boston called Mercer & Sons. They were working on a low-cost insulin alternative. They were about to go to market when a venture capital firm offered to partner with them. Donovan's eyes widened. He remembered Mercer & Sons. It was a small fish he had eaten years ago. He had stripped the assets, sold the research to Big Pharma to bury it, and bankrupted the founder. The founder of that company, Lila continued, was named Robert Mercer. He fought the hostile takeover in court for 2 years. He spent his life savings. He mortgaged his house. He died of a heart attack 6 months ago, broke and broken, because he couldn't understand how the contract he signed had been used to destroy him. Lila took a step closer to the billionaire. Robert Mercer was my father, and I was in my final year at Harvard Law, top of my class, when you ruined him. I had to drop out to pay for his funeral and his debts. I had to take a job waiting tables to keep my mother from losing her home. A gasp went through the room. The other diners were watching now, captivated. I recognized your signature on the bottom of the page, Mr. Kinsley, Lila said, and I recognize the drafting style. You use the same dirty tricks every time. Only this time you got arrogant. You challenged the wrong waitress. Donovan looked around. Winston was packing his briefcase, looking at Donovan with disgust. The manager, Gavin, was standing with his mouth open, unsure whether to call security or applaud. You think you've won? Donovan hissed, buttoning his jacket. "You think this little speech matters? I'm Donovan Kinsley. I can buy this restaurant and fire you in 10 minutes. I can ensure you never work in this city again." "You could," Lila said, "but Mr. Winston here has his phone recording." She pointed to the table. Winston's smartphone was face up, the voice memo app running. The red light was blinking. "I started recording when you began shouting about the pension funds," Winston said, picking up the phone. "I have you on tape admitting that morality is a luxury and confirming you intended to strip the assets. With the Waitress's analysis on record, this is admissible evidence of bad faith negotiation." Donovan's face went white. "Keep the money," Donovan snarled at Lila. He grabbed his coat, looking like a cornered animal. "You'll hear from my lawyers." "I look forward to it," Lila replied. "I know their playbook better than they do." Donovan stormed out of the private dining room, bumping into a busboy on his way out. But the nightmare for him was just beginning. The hangover from the adrenaline of the night before didn't last long for Lila. It was replaced by the cold, hard reality of the morning sun. She sat on the edge of her mattress in her small studio apartment in South Chicago. The walls were thin, and she could hear the neighbor's television blasting the morning news, but her mind was replaying the look on Donovan Kinsley's face. It was the look of a man who had never lost, suddenly realizing he was bleeding. But men like Donovan didn't lick their wounds. They hunted. Lila's phone buzzed. It was a notification from her banking app. Account frozen, suspicious activity. Her stomach dropped. She tapped the screen, trying to log in, but her credentials were rejected. Before she could process what was happening, her email pinged. It was a message from the management of the Obsidian. Subject: Notice of termination. Body: Effective immediately. Your employment is terminated due to gross misconduct and violation of guest privacy policies. Do not return to the premises. Your final check will be withheld pending an investigation into damages. Lila let out a shaky breath. She had expected to be fired. She hadn't expected them to freeze her bank account. She quickly dressed in jeans and a sweater, grabbing her coat. She needed to get to the bank branch downtown to sort this out. She needed cash for groceries. She needed to pay the electric bill. As she stepped out of her apartment building, a black SUV with tinted windows was idling at the curb. Two men in dark suits stepped out. They weren't police, and they weren't government agents. They were corporate security. Private muscle. One of them, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, stepped into her path. He held out a manila envelope. "Lila Mercer?" he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "Who are you?" Lila asked, clutching her purse. "You've been served," the man said, shoving the envelope into her chest. She instinctively grabbed it. "Mr. Kinsley is suing you for defamation, corporate espionage, and breach of a non-disclosure agreement. He's also filed a restraining order preventing you from contacting any employee of Kinsley Ventures or its affiliates." "I never signed a non-disclosure agreement," Lila protested, her voice rising. "The terms of your employment at the restaurant included a confidentiality clause covering all client discussions," the man droned. "You violated that when you read private documents and repeated them in a public setting." The second man smirked. "Mr. Kinsley also wanted us to deliver a message personally. He said, 'Welcome to the real world.'" They got back into the SUV and drove off, leaving Lila standing on the cracked pavement with the legal summons in her hand. She opened the envelope. The lawsuit was staggering. He was seeking damages of $10 million for reputational harm and interference with prospective economic advantage. It was a slap suit, a strategic lawsuit against public participation. It wasn't designed to win in court. It was designed to bankrupt her with legal fees and stress before she ever stepped foot in front of a judge. Lila spent the next 3 days in a haze of bureaucratic hell. When she went to the bank, the manager, a kind woman who usually greeted her by name, wouldn't look her in the eye. "I'm sorry, Ms. Mercer. The freeze order came from the fraud department. It's flagged as a federal investigation into corporate theft. Until it's cleared, we can't release funds." When she tried to apply for a temp job at a paralegal agency, the recruiter loved her resume until he had typed her name into the system. His face went pale. "I'm sorry. The system has you red flagged. Do not hire. High liability risk." "I can't override it." Donovan wasn't just suing her. He was erasing her. He was using his vast network of influence to ensure that she couldn't earn $1 in the city of Chicago. He wanted her homeless. He wanted her starving. He wanted her to come crawling back to beg for mercy so he could spit in her face. By Friday, Lila was down to her last $40 in cash. She sat in a public library, using the free Wi-Fi because her phone data had been cut off. She was researching Donovan's lawyers, looking for a weakness in the filing, but she was exhausted. She hadn't eaten a full meal in 2 days. She stared at the computer screen, her vision blurring. Was this it? Was she going to end up exactly like her father, crushed by the weight of a checkbook she couldn't compete with? She remembered her father's funeral. It had been raining then, too. She remembered promising his grave that she would finish her degree, that she would fight for people like him. Fat lot of good that did, she whispered to herself, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Talking to yourself is the first sign of madness," a voice said from the end of the table. "Or so my ex-wife used to tell me." Lila looked up, startled. Standing there, looking out of place in the fluorescent-lit library in his tailored wool coat, was Winston Pratt. Lila stiffened. "If you're here to deliver another lawsuit, you can put it on the pile," she said bitterly, gesturing to the stack of papers next to her. Winston looked around nervously, checking to see if anyone was watching. He pulled out a chair and sat down opposite her. He looked tired, bags under his eyes, but he didn't look like the terrified prey he had been in the restaurant. "I'm not here to sue you, Lila," Winston said softly. "I'm here to thank you." Lila scoffed. "You have a funny way of showing it. Your partner has destroyed my life in 72 hours. "He's not my partner," Winston corrected. "Not anymore, thanks to you." He placed a coffee cup on the table in front of her. It was hot, smelling of mocha and hazelnut. Lila stared at it, her stomach growling. "Drink it," Winston urged. "You look like you haven't slept." Lila took a sip. The warmth spread through her chest, grounding her. "What happened?" "After you left," Winston began, leaning in. "I took the recording to the Aerodyne board. We voted unanimously to reject the merger. We also fired the general counsel, who had vetted the deal. Turns out he was on Kinsley's payroll under the table. You saved the company, Lila. You saved 3,000 jobs." "That's great for you," Lila said, her voice hollow. "I'm happy for the 3,000 people. Meanwhile, I can't pay rent." "I know," Winston said grimly. "I heard what Donovan is doing. He's gone nuclear. He's calling in favors from every bank, every agency, every landlord in the city. He wants to make an example of you." "So why are you here?" Lila asked. "If he sees you with me, he'll come after you next." "He's already coming after me," Winston admitted. "He's trying to short-sell Aerodyne's stock to crash our value. But I can handle a stock war. What I can't handle is the guilt of watching you drown for helping me." Winston reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a plain white business card. There was no logo, no company name, just a phone number and a name printed in elegant, embossed font. Evelyn Graves. "I can't hire you," Winston said. Aerodyne is under too much scrutiny. If I put you on the payroll, Donovan will use it as proof that you were a corporate spy working for me all along. It would ruin your defense." Lila looked at the card. "Who is Evelyn Graves?" "She's the only person in this city Donovan Kinsley fears," Winston said. Lila frowned. "I know that name. She was a judge. The iron gavel of the appellate court. She resigned in disgrace 5 years ago." "She didn't resign," Winston said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She was forced out. Kinsley manufactured a scandal involving her husband's finances to kill a ruling she was about to make against his tech monopoly. He destroyed her career to save his stock price." Lila ran her thumb over the card. "Evelyn has been living in isolation since then," Winston continued. "She doesn't take clients. She doesn't practice law. She just watches. But I called her. I told her about the waitress who knew the Sullivan precedent. I told her about the daughter of Robert Mercer." Winston stood up. "She wants to meet you. Tonight? 8/5, 8 p.m. The address is on the back." He placed a thick envelope on the table next to the coffee. "There's $5,000 in there. Cash. Consider it a consultancy fee for the other night. It's untraceable. Pay your rent, Lila, and then go see Evelyn." Before Lila could respond, Winston turned and walked away, disappearing into the stacks of books. Lila opened the envelope. The cash was there. It was enough to keep the wolves at the door for a few months. But more importantly, she held the card. Evelyn Graves. That evening, Lila took a taxi to the address on the card. It led her away from the city centre, out to an old, affluent neighbourhood on the North Shore, where the houses were set back deep behind iron gates. The address belonged to a Gothic stone mansion that looked abandoned. Vines grew wild over the brickwork, and the windows were dark. Lila hesitated at the gate, buzzing the intercom. "State your business." A sharp, raspy female voice crackled through the speaker. "I'm Lila Mercer," she said. "Winston Pratt sent me." The gate clicked and swung open with a groan. Lila walked up the long driveway. The front door opened before she knocked. Standing there was a woman who looked nothing like the photos Lila remembered from law textbooks. Evelyn Graves was in her 60s, wearing a velvet robe, holding a cigarette in a long holder. Her grey hair was loose, wild around her shoulders. But her eyes were piercingly bright, intelligent, and dangerous. "So," Evelyn said, looking Lila up and down. "The girl who kicked the hornet's nest." "I didn't mean to kick it," Lila said. "I just didn't want to get stung." "Come in," Evelyn commanded, turning her back. "It's freezing out there." The inside of the house was a chaotic library. Stacks of file boxes lined the hallways, floor to ceiling. Every surface was covered in legal briefs, newspapers, and sticky notes. It looked like the headquarters of a conspiracy theorist or a genius. Evelyn led her to a study where a fire was crackling. She poured 2 glasses of scotch and handed one to Lila. "I looked into your father's case," Evelyn said, sitting in a leather wingback chair. "Robert Mercer. Good man. Terrible businessman. He trusted the contract. Never trust the contract, dear. Trust the leverage." "I know that now," Lila said, taking a sip of the burning liquid. "Donovan Kinsley took everything from us. And now he's trying to finish the job with you," Evelyn noted. She gestured to a pile of papers on her desk. "I saw the filing, the slap suit. It's a masterpiece of bullying. He doesn't have a case, of course. You can't breach confidentiality on a document that was abandoned in a public space, especially when the content reveals illegal activity. It falls under whistleblower protection statutes." "I know," Lila said, "but I can't afford to fight him. He'll drag it out for years." "He will," Evelyn agreed. She leaned forward, the firelight dancing in her eyes. "Unless we don't fight him in court." Lila frowned. "What do you mean?" "Donovan Kinsley thinks the law is a weapon he owns," Evelyn said, a cruel smile touching her lips. "He used it to break your father. He used it to break me. But he has a weakness. He's arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable because he hides his assets in a web of shell companies that no one can untangle." Evelyn stood up and walked to a wall covered in a massive corkboard. It was a map of Kinsley's empire. Strings connected companies, offshore accounts, and names. But there were gaps, missing pieces. "I have been tracking him for 5 years," Evelyn said. "I know where he buries the bodies. I know about the bribes to the zoning commission in 2021. I know about the toxic waste dumping scandal he covered up in 2023, but I never had the smoking gun. I never had the connector." She turned to Lila. "You saw the Aerodyne contract. You saw the Vanguard Holdings clause." "Yes," Lila said. "It's owned by the Kinsley Personal Trust." "Exactly." Evelyn slammed her hand on the desk. "The Personal Trust. That is the ghost key. For years I suspected it existed, but I couldn't prove which entities flowed into it. By identifying Vanguard as a subsidiary of the Personal Trust, you have given me the thread." Evelyn walked over to Lila and placed her hands on Lila's shoulders. "If we pull that thread, Lila, the whole sweater unravels. We don't just win your lawsuit. We expose him for tax evasion, securities fraud, and racketeering. We don't just beat him. We put him in a federal prison." Lila felt a shiver run down her spine. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice. "But we need more," Evelyn said. "Knowing it exists isn't enough. We need physical proof. We need the ledger of the Kinsley Personal Trust." "Where is it?" Lila asked. "There's only one hard copy," Evelyn said. "Donovan is paranoid about hackers. He keeps the master ledger offline. It's in a safe, and I know exactly where that safe is." "Where?" "In his penthouse," Evelyn said. "He's hosting the annual Kinsley Charity Gala this Saturday. A masquerade ball. 500 guests. Security will be focused on the perimeter, not the internal library." Lila stared at her. "You want me to break into Donovan Kinsley's penthouse?" "No," Evelyn smiled, and for the first time, she looked like the formidable judge she used to be. "I want you to walk in through the front door. You're going to be my +1. But first, we need to get you a dress. If we're going to take down a king, you need to look like a queen." Lila looked at the map on the wall, then at the fire. She thought of her father, dying of a broken heart. She thought of the men throwing the lawsuit at her chest. "Let's do it," Lila said. The Kinsley Annual Charity Gala was not merely a party. It was a coronation. Held at the Grand Millennium Hotel, the event commandeered the entire top 3 floors, including Donovan Kinsley's private triplex penthouse, which sat atop the hotel like a crown of glass and steel. The theme was Venetian Night. 500 of Chicago's wealthiest elites arrived in black ties and elaborate face-covering masks. It was a sea of anonymity, a place where sins were hidden behind feathers and gold leaf. Lila Mercer stepped out of a black town car, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She wore a floor-length gown of emerald silk that Evelyn had pulled from a cedar chest, vintage, timeless, and tailored to perfection. On her face was a mask of dark green velvet and silver filigree that covered everything but her eyes and mouth. She didn't look like a waitress. She looked like old money. She looked like she belonged. "Remember," Evelyn's voice buzzed in the microscopic earpiece hidden in Lila's left ear. Evelyn was parked in a surveillance van 2 blocks away, monitoring the security feeds she had accessed via a back door Winston had installed years ago. Donovan is in the main ballroom on the 50th floor. The private elevator to the penthouse is guarded by 2 men. You need a distraction. Lila scanned the room. The opulence was nauseating. Champagne flowed like water, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh oysters. She spotted Donovan near the ice sculpture. He was wearing a mask of a golden lion. Fitting, she thought. The predator. "I see him," Lila whispered. "Winston is approaching the guards now," Evelyn said. Across the room, Winston Pratt, wearing a nondescript domino mask, stumbled toward the private elevator. He was acting drunk, loudly proclaiming that he needed to use the executive bathroom. "Sir, you can't go up there," one of the guards said, stepping forward to intercept him. "Do you know who I am?" Winston slurred, grabbing the guard's lapel. "I'm a board member. I own you." As the scene caused a commotion, drawing the attention of both guards and several guests, Lila slipped past them, moving with the grace of a shadow. She swiped the cloned keycard Evelyn had prepared against the elevator panel. Beep. The doors slid open. Lila stepped in and pressed the button for the 53rd floor. As the doors closed, she saw Donovan turn his head toward the elevator. Had he seen her? The elevator ascended smoothly. Lila checked her clutch purse. Inside was a high-resolution portable scanner and a flash drive. She didn't need to steal the physical book if she could image the pages. The doors opened into the penthouse. It was silent, a stark contrast to the thumping bass of the music downstairs. The walls were lined with modern art that cost more than the neighborhood Lila grew up in. "Library is down the hall. Second door on the left," Evelyn guided her. Lila moved quickly. The library was vast, smelling of leather and cigar smoke. Following Evelyn's intel, she went to the portrait of Donovan hanging behind the desk. She tilted the frame. Behind it sat a wall safe. "Okay, I'm at the safe," Lila whispered. "What's the combination?" "Try 102405, Evelyn said. "The date he made his first billion." Lila spun the dial. Nothing. The light remained red. "Try 06 and 1588, Evelyn suggested. "His mother's birthday." Lila tried it. The mechanism clicked but didn't open. "Wrong. I have one attempt left before it enters lockdown and alerts security." "Think, Lila," Evelyn hissed. "You know him. You read his psychological profile. What does a narcissist value most?" Lila looked around the room. It was a shrine to his own ego. Awards, trophies, magazine covers. Her eyes landed on a framed newspaper clipping on the desk. It wasn't about money. It was an old, yellowing article from his college days. Donovan Kinsley acquitted in assault scandal. It was the moment he realized he was above the law. The moment he became a monster. The date of his acquittal, Lila realized. December 12th, 1999. She spun the dial. 1212 Unanasen. Click, whirr. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside, sitting alone on a velvet shelf, was a black leather ledger. "I'm in," Lila breathed. She grabbed the book. She opened it. It was handwritten. Rows of shell companies, offshore accounts, and bribes. And there, on page 15, was Vanguard Holdings, linked directly to Kinsley Personal Trust, and a payout of $500,000 to the judge who had ruined Evelyn's career. "It's all here," Lila said, her hands trembling. "He bribed the zoning commissioner. He bribed the EPA inspector. He owns the company that bought the land from my father." "Scan it." "Now," Evelyn ordered. Lila pulled out the scanner. She began swiping it over the pages, the blue light capturing the damning evidence. She was halfway through when the elevator chimed in the hallway. "Someone's coming," Evelyn shouted. "Get out!" Lila shoved the book back into the safe and slammed it shut. She spun the portrait back into place. There was nowhere to hide. The footsteps were heavy, approaching the library door. Lila made a split-second decision. She grabbed a book from the shelf, a rare first edition of The Great Gatsby, and moved to the window, posing as if she were admiring the view of the city. The door opened. It was Donovan. He had removed his lion mask, his face flushed with alcohol and adrenaline. He froze when he saw the woman in the emerald dress standing by his window. "I didn't realize I had a guest," Donovan said, his voice low and dangerous. He walked into the room, closing the door behind him. "The upstairs is off limits." Lila turned slowly. She kept her mask on. "I apologize," she said, pitching her voice lower, adding a sultry, bored affectation. "The party downstairs was suffocating. I was looking for a view that matched the price of admission." Donovan paused. He didn't recognize her voice. He was intrigued. He liked women who broke the rules as long as they were beautiful. He walked toward her, eyeing the emerald silk. "You have expensive taste," Donovan said, gesturing to the book in her hand. "That edition is worth $50,000. "It's a tragedy," Lila said, tapping the cover. "A man who builds a castle of lies to impress a girl, only to die in a pool of his own making." She looked him in the eyes through the slits of her mask. "Do you identify with Gatsby, Mr. Kinsley?" Donovan laughed, stepping closer. He was close enough that she could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. Gatsby was a fool. He cared what people thought. "I don't." He reached out, his hand hovering near her mask. "Who are you? I know every player in this city." "I don't know you." "I'm a ghost," Lila said, her heart pounding so hard she thought he must hear it. "Just passing through." "Take off the mask," Donovan commanded softly. The air in the room crackled with tension. If he saw her face, he would call security. She would be arrested for trespassing. The scanner in her purse would be found. It would be over. "I prefer the mystery," Lila said. She moved to step past him, but he blocked her path. "No one walks away from me until I say so," Donovan said, his charm evaporating, replaced by the bully she knew so well. Suddenly, the lights in the penthouse flickered and died. The room plunged into darkness. "What the hell?" Donovan shouted, turning toward the door. "Go! Now!" Evelyn screamed in her ear. "I cut the main breaker." Lila kicked off her high heels and ran. She sprinted past Donovan in the dark, shoving him into the desk. He shouted, crashing into a lamp. She bolted into the hallway, down the corridor, and to the stairwell door. She burst through it just as the emergency lights flickered on. She didn't stop running until she hit the ground floor, exiting through the kitchen loading dock where Winston's car was waiting, engine running. She threw herself into the back seat, gasping for air, clutching her purse to her chest. "Did you get it?" Winston asked, looking at her in the rearview mirror. Lila pulled out the scanner. The little green light indicated the upload was complete. "I got everything," she said. The morning of the hearing, the sky over Chicago was a bruised purple, heavy with the threat of a storm that refused to break. Inside the federal courthouse, however, the air was electric, buzzing with a different kind of pressure. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Reporters from every major financial news outlet crammed into the gallery benches, their laptops open, fingers poised. They were there because Donovan Kinsley's public relations team had promised a spectacle. They had spun the narrative masterfully, a titan of industry defending his reputation against a bitter, low-level employee who had stolen trade secrets. Donovan wanted an audience for Lila's destruction. He wanted the world to see what happened to people who crossed him. Lila Mercer sat alone at the defendant's table. She wore a simple, inexpensive grey suit that she had bought at a thrift store the day before. Her hands were folded on the empty mahogany table in front of her. To the onlookers, she looked small, isolated, and hopelessly outmatched. But beneath the table, her legs were steady. Her heart wasn't racing with fear anymore. It was beating with the slow, heavy rhythm of resolve. She wasn't just Lila Mercer, the waitress, today. She was the ghost of every person Donovan had ever crushed. On the other side of the aisle, Donovan Kinsley looked like a king holding court. He lounged in his chair, flanked by a phalanx of 5 high-priced attorneys in bespoke navy suits. They laughed among themselves, shuffling stacks of motions and briefs, exuding the casual confidence of men who had already bought the verdict. Donovan caught Lila's eye and smirked, a cold, predatory expression that said, "You should have taken the $5,000. "All rise," the bailiff's voice boomed, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Judge Holloway swept into the room, his black robes billowing. He was a stern, no-nonsense jurist, known for his impatience with theatrics. He took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and peered down at the courtroom with weary eyes. Case number 44B, Kinsley Ventures versus Mercer, the judge announced, opening the file before him. He looked at the plaintiff's table, nodding to Donovan's lead counsel, a sharp-jawed man named Sterling. Then his gaze shifted to Lila, sitting alone. Judge Holloway frowned, leaning over the bench. "Ms. Mercer?" he began, his voice echoing in the silent room. "I see no counsel of record for you. Are you appearing today pro se? Do you intend to represent yourself against a $10 million liability claim?" A ripple of laughter went through the plaintiff's table. Donovan leaned back, whispering something to Sterling that made the lawyer chuckle. Lila stood up. She didn't look at Donovan. She looked straight at the judge. "No, Your Honor." Before the judge could ask for clarification, the heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a resounding thud. Every head in the room turned. Walking up the center aisle was Evelyn Graves. She was not wearing the judicial robes she had been stripped of 5 years ago, but she commanded more authority in her sharp black suit than anyone else in the building. She walked with a terrifying grace, the click of her heels on the marble floor sounding like gunshots in the sudden silence. She carried nothing but a battered leather briefcase. The reaction in the gallery was immediate. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Is that Evelyn Graves? I thought she was gone. I thought she was disgraced." Donovan's smile vanished instantly. He sat up straight, his face draining of color. He leaned frantically toward Sterling. "I thought she was dead," he hissed, his voice carrying in the quiet room. "You told me she was finished." "Your Honor," Evelyn said, her voice clear and projecting to the back row without a microphone. She reached the defense table and placed her hand on Lila's shoulder. "I am entering my appearance as counsel for the defendant." Judge Holloway stared at her for a long moment, and then a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He remembered Evelyn. He respected her. "The court accepts your appearance, Ms. Graves, though you are cutting it rather close." "My apologies, Your Honor," Evelyn said, opening her briefcase. "I was waiting on a delivery." "Very well," the judge said. "Mr. Sterling, you may proceed with your opening statement." "Actually, Your Honor," Evelyn interrupted, her voice hardening, "we move for an immediate dismissal of all charges with prejudice." Sterling jumped to his feet, indignant. "Objection! This is a frivolous delay tactic from a—" "And," Evelyn continued, raising her voice over him, "we are filing a counterclaim for malicious prosecution, wrongful termination, and violations of the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act." The room gasped. "Rico, that wasn't corporate litigation. That was organized crime law. That was what prosecutors used to take down the mafia. This is preposterous," Sterling shouted, his face reddening. "These are baseless accusations from a disgruntled former judge with a vendetta. I demand sanctions." "Are they baseless?" Evelyn turned slowly to face the gallery, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on the back doors. "Agent Miller, if you please." The doors opened again. This time the silence was absolute. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a navy windbreaker stepped inside. On the back of his jacket, in bold yellow letters, was FBI. He was not alone. Behind him, 6 other agents filed in, moving with tactical precision to block the exits. Donovan Kinsley stood up, knocking his chair over with a loud clatter. He looked at the agents, then at Evelyn, and finally at Laya. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the raw, animal panic of a trapped beast. "Donovan Kinsley," Agent Miller announced, his voice booming. "We are executing a federal warrant for your arrest." "Arrest?" Donovan stammered, backing away until he bumped into his own lawyers. "For what? You have nothing on me. My finances are airtight." Laya stepped out from behind the defense table. She walked until she was standing in the center of the aisle, facing the man who had destroyed her father. "We have the ledger, Donovan," Laya said. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her voice was steady, cutting through the chaos. Donovan froze. His eyes widened, darting from Laya's face to the grey suit she wore. Suddenly, the image of the woman in the emerald gown at the masquerade flashed in his mind. The mysterious guest. The power outage. "The Kinsley Personal Trust," Laya continued, reciting the facts from memory. "We know about the bribes to the zoning commission. We know about the money laundering through Vanguard Holdings. We know you paid off Judge Thompson to frame Evelyn 5 years ago. And we know you deliberately tanked Mercer and Sons to short the stock and bankrupt my family." "That ledger is in a safe," Donovan screamed, pointing a trembling finger at her. He was unraveling, the carefully constructed mask of the billionaire dissolving to reveal the thug underneath. "It's in a biometric safe in my private home. If you have it, you stole it. It's illegal search and seizure. You can't use it." "We didn't seize it," Evelyn said, stepping up beside Laya, a shark-like grin spreading across her face. "We received an anonymous digital tip-off containing a full scan of the documents, and under the federal whistleblower protection laws, which you so kindly reminded my client about in your own lawsuit, the evidence is fully admissible." Agent Miller moved in, pulling Donovan's arms behind his back. "Donovan Kinsley, you have the right to remain silent." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. Donovan struggled, thrashing against the agents. "Get off me. Do you know who I am? I own this city." The flashbulbs from the gallery erupted in a blinding storm of white light, capturing the image that would define the decade. The King of Chicago, dragged away in chains, brought down by the waitress he thought he could bully. As they hauled him toward the side exit, Donovan dug his heels in. He locked eyes with Laya one last time. His face was twisted with hate and confusion. "You're a nobody," he screamed, spit flying from his lips. "You serve steak. You're nothing." Laya didn't flinch. She watched him with pity, not fear. "I'm the daughter of Robert Mercer," Laya replied, her voice ringing out like a bell. "And I'm the woman who just cancelled your contract." The door slammed shut behind him, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. 6 months later, the biting wind of Chicago had softened into a gentle spring breeze. On the outskirts of Boston, the grass in the quiet hillside cemetery was a vibrant, living green. Laya stood before a grey stone marker. Robert Mercer, beloved father, dreamer. She knelt down, ignoring the damp earth on her jeans, and placed a folded piece of paper against the stone. It was a letter on thick, cream-colored stationery. The letterhead read, Yale Law School, Office of Admissions. "I did it, Dad," she whispered, her fingers tracing the letters of his name. He can't hurt anyone else. The assets are being returned. The pension funds are safe. It's over. She stayed there for a long time, listening to the wind in the trees, feeling a weight lift off her chest that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for 3 years. A hand rested gently on her shoulder. Lila looked up. Winston Pratt stood there, looking healthier than he had in years. The bags under his eyes were gone. Beside him stood Evelyn Graves, wearing a trench coat and sunglasses, looking every bit the legal titan she had reclaimed her title as. "He was sentenced this morning," Winston said softly. 20 years. No parole. The judge threw the book at him. "It's not enough to give you back the time you lost," Lila said, standing up and brushing off her knees. "But it's justice." "It's a start," Evelyn corrected her. She took off her sunglasses, looking at Lila with a rare warmth. "Winston has restructured Aerodyne. It's employee-owned now. But he needs a legal team he can trust, and I have a new firm that needs a junior partner with a unique skill set." Lila looked from the grave to the 2 people standing before her, her unlikely allies. She thought about the contract on the table at the Obsidian the moment she decided to stop being invisible. "I have law school to finish first," Lila said. "We can wait," Evelyn smiled. "The world isn't running out of corrupt billionaires anytime soon. We'll save a desk for you." Lila looked back at the horizon, where the sun was breaking through the clouds. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She wasn't a victim. She was a fighter. "Yeah," Lila said, smiling for the first time in a long time. "I'm ready." What an incredible journey for Lila. From being humiliated in a restaurant to taking down a corrupt empire, she proved that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you overlook. It's a powerful reminder that knowledge really is the ultimate weapon, and that karma has a way of finding everyone eventually. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets us know you want more dramatic stories like this one. What was your favorite moment? Was it the masquerade infiltration, or seeing Donovan's face when the FBI walked in? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.